We are now moving to Hungary and we'll greet our guests online. Hello, Professor Dr. Mónika Mátay, and there might be Professor Ferenc Miszlivetz also somewhere. Hello, and welcome to Maribor.
Hello, hello.
Hello, we are looking forward to your contribution focusing on Jewish heritage and deportations from Kőszeg and Szombathely, expanding our regional perspective on memory, loss, and historical responsibility. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
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 Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm just coming from the end, the finish of our 1 week winter school, at the beginning of which we had the honor to host many of the leading figures, rector, vice rector of Alma Mater Europaea. So thank you very much for inviting us to this very important workshop. And I would say a few words for introduction, and then I would give the word to Mónika Mátay, who is a senior research fellow and historian here at iASK, who's dealing with microhistory and also especially Jewish question, minority questions. And she's going to give you more numbers and details about the fate of Hungarian Jews in Szombathely and Kőszeg. But why is an Institute of Advanced Studies dealing with microhistory and regional history? Is because we are convinced that without better understanding of our immediate past, we cannot really build a stable future, and the identity of local communities is a kind of endangered by not being able to face their past, not being able to talk about it. So what we did as an institute in Kőszeg, which is a very tiny little border town with 3 names, actually a German name Günz and a Croatian name Kőszeg, close to Szombathely, a bigger city. We decided to understand cultural heritage and cultural heritage management as a key factor in terms of developing our small and medium-sized cities and our region, which is a border region and which is quite marginalized, quite abandoned compared to other parts of the country. But also where history is very rich, which binds us very closely together with you in Maribor and in other Croatian, Slovenian and Croatian settlements and cities. And that kind of richness should be explored and understood. So why the Jewish question? The Jewish question and the annihilation of Jews and taking them to concentration camp from these middle-sized and medium-sized and small cities were completely devastating. That came together with the close carpet bombing of Szombathely, and with the Trianon borders after the First World War. And they put almost completely in a marginal position of many cities here around. Now, here, what happened, and we started to dig deeper in the cultural and social life of Jewish families between the 2 world wars. And it turned out that they played an absolutely decisive role in many ways, cultural terms, in inventing many NGOs, civil society, in networking cross-border, in bringing in innovations from near abroad and farther away. And especially between Kőszeg and Szombathely, this interconnectedness was fascinating. So what we have here is a tiny little city, Mónika is going to explain in details, where less than 200 Jews were living between the two world wars, and where 2 or 3 eminent families were reaching a very high level of visibility and fame. Among them, Philip Shea, who was the founder of the synagogue, and who also became, together with his cousin Philip Shea, Friedrich Shea, a close advisor of the family of the emperor in Vienna. And for that reason, they became noblemen, and they were knighted, and they became, especially Philip Shea, a donor, a mecenas for Kőszeg. So they stepped out from their Orthodox Jewish environment. They studied in Kőszeg, Sopron, and then Vienna. They became very, very famous financiers. And then Philip Shea came back to Kőszeg and became a mecenas and an ecumenical donor for Catholic and Protestant, and of course the Jewish community. And for that reason, after his death, the Kőszeg Society decided to name a street about him, which was renamed. The name was changed by the communists in the 50s because the title Baron was in front of his name, Baron, Philip Baron Shea, the Koromla. And the end of the story is that the synagogue, this beautiful small building, was completely abandoned after 44. And therefore, I've had a chance to visit it when we started our summer universities about 30 years ago. And it was, it was an incredible experience when I saw that this should be changed. This is not just a piece of jewel, but it's a fantastic place for remembrance. And so it happened that we succeeded to restore the synagogue in its beauty, unfortunately without having the chance to bring back the Jewish community. But, and here is the interesting, how to say it, switch in this story. It seemed that most of the Jews from Szombathely, several thousands, I think 3,400, and a few hundred Jews from Kőszeg were completely wiped out, eliminated, gassed, and the few who remained, maybe came back to Kőszeg, but they couldn't settle anymore. But the memory survived. And so it happened that a far remote member of the family from London discovered the activity of Friedrich Shea in Vienna. He was a great cultural actor and also a mecenas for Burgtheater, etc. And after doing research in the Viennese archive, she found, Catherine Henderson, she found in the files the name of Philip Shea and an unpronounceable city, Kőszeg. So she came to Kőszeg about 50 years ago, and we met. And ever since, an interesting relationship developed, at the end of which, when the synagogue was restored, Cathy Henderson was able to collect about 20-30 members of the family living in 3 continents, and they all gathered in Kőszeg when we renamed the Shea Philip City, and it's again Philip Shea City, Philip Shea Street in Kőszeg. So this is the framework within which we think, and this is why we publish documents, memoirs, interviews with eyewitnesses, with relatives of those who went through the terrible days and months of Holocaust. And the idea is behind the hypothesis that you can not just learn from history. History, if understood well and in detail and in a proper context, helps us to understand what we should do in the future, how to rebuild, how to reformulate, rethink our identity, who we are. Hungarians, only Hungarians, a little bit German, a little bit Slavs, Slovenians, Slovaks, or Central Europeans, who we are. What is our purpose in academia or in teaching or in intellectual life? I don't go further because Mónika has a lot to say in concrete terms, and I give the word to her. Maybe at the end I will have some kind of final thoughts. So Mónika, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Yes.
you.
Yes, okay, thank you, thank you. So before I would go into the details, I would like to connect. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. We already cooperated with Maribor, so it's again a great opportunity to talk further. And I would like to connect first to the previous lecture about Erika first, because I just will talk about very briefly about two memoirs. The one came out in 2011, and the other one we will publish this year, which one female and one male memoir. And the man, Sándor Görög, just passed away a few months ago. We made interviews with him, and we actually talked a lot. He was a great scientist, a chemist. And his father actually, from the train, of course, he was a Jew, and his father, who was a doctor in Szombathely, whenever they arrived in Auschwitz, Mengele immediately grasped him because he wanted to use him for his experiments, which he did. So the father knew that his wife and his daughter were guests, sent to the gas chamber immediately. He knew it, and he was able to survive for another few months with Miklós Nyíszly. Perhaps you are familiar with his name. He was also a famous assistant of Mengele. So the reason why I would like to continue with this is that I really believe it's important to publish these memoirs in English as much as we can, and the memories will be better saved if we try to collect them together. And I think it's a good point where we can connect to each other. So I think it's very important to keep that in mind. Okay, as for Kőszeg and Szombathely, so these are two neighboring cities, and I would like just to start with a very dramatic point. When on the left photo, you can see the last rabbi of Kőszeg, Izsák Links, and his wife, a very intelligent person. Of course, I don't have time to go into the details, but he left behind a very important heritage, intellectual heritage. And that's also true for the Catholic priest, who was the leading priest of the town that time, László Székely. And the rabbi actually turned in this very dramatic time to the Catholic priest, please help us. Until that point, they hardly talked to each other. And well, Székely did what he could, of course, not much at this point in time. But I think it's, again, important to point to these events. So very briefly, the background, I will not go into all the details. You can see the population of Kőszeg is a very small town, much smaller than Szombathely, which is now roughly 70,000. Kőszeg, again, very neighboring in the sense that 17 kilometers from each other at the western border of the country. The important thing is that both of them are much closer to Vienna, the Austrian capital, than to Budapest, which of course had a very important influence on the history of both cities. Kőszeg, how it actually entered the European consciousness or mental map was due to a siege in 1532, when Suleiman I tried to occupy the city, which he could not. And that became well known because Hans Sachs wrote a beautiful poem or a description about it. What is important that Jews already lived in the city that time, and they actually participated in the siege. They defended the city, but as we know, in the early modern times, they had to leave these small towns, and this was true for the Kőszeg Jews. They were forbidden for Kőszeg for 200 years. And Ferenc already mentioned that it's a multi-ethnic region, and this is very true. As for the Jewish population, you can see the numbers that the highest did not reach 4% at the turn of the century. Otherwise, it was much lower than, for example, in Szombathely, when they reached 5%, 6%, 7%, depending on the time period. Not speaking of other Hungarian small towns where, at certain places, there were 20-25% of the total population who were Jews. So in Kőszeg, it was relatively a small number. And at the time of the Holocaust, it was less than 100 people who actually were taken from the city. Okay, Ferenc mentioned Philip Shea. So what I would like to refer to in both cities, it's very important that until the end of the 18th century, Jews were not allowed legally to settle down, and they could hardly stay in the cities. They tried to participate in the fairs, and they had trading connections with local people, but otherwise they were not allowed to move in. But from the very late 18th century, in both cities, Jewish entrepreneurs, people showed up, tried to move in. Again, it's a long story. They bought a house and then they were forced to sell it again for a smaller price. So it was not an easy mission, but by the first half of the 19th century, the Jewish population, both in Kőszeg and Szombathely, started to be stable. And Philip Shea, whose name Ferenc already mentioned, he was perhaps the most prosperous and the most important and prominent figure. He actually was not only an entrepreneur, but he participated in very important, otherwise important work for the city. He was a great donor of Kőszeg, hospital, kindergarten, etc., etc. And he also built the synagogue or financed the synagogue. And very importantly, he built out a network like many other Jewish entrepreneurs in this time, and he made good connections with Vienna, family connections and business connections. And one more thing, he was also Franz Joseph, the emperor, ennobled in order to integrate Jewish people, the elite of the Jews, into society. He ennobled Philip Shea, so he became a baron in 1859. And this is the pictures of the synagogue, the local synagogue, which is, the important thing is that it was built the same year when the huge synagogue in Budapest, which is the third biggest building like that in the world. So it's a relatively early time, 1859, compared to the, the most synagogues which in this period, which followed during the next centuries. Okay, and another one of Szombathely, as I told you, most synagogues were built later. So this is also an important and a very beautiful building. And here the Catholic, intense Catholic religious life and Jewish life actually went in parallel in this small city. And as like Kőszeg, Szombathely also became an important intellectual center. I don't want to go into the details because I would like to leave a little time to the Second World War or more time. So I don't know why the pictures you cannot see. Actually, there are some photos from both memoir writers. So the one I already mentioned is Ágnes Ceglédi, who was born in 1935, and she wrote her memoirs more than 10 years ago, but now we would like to publish them. It's 133 pages, very much a female memoir. So she really paid attention to, to the life of women in this environment. She survived it in Kőszeg, and then later, in Szombathely, the Holocaust, and later they moved to neighboring village because they had to leave the city after the German occupation. And the other memoir already I mentioned was written by Sándor Görög, who actually published it more than 15 years ago. And the interesting thing about these two people is that they went to the same kindergarten. So last year I was still in this very lucky position that I could talk to Ágnes, and I asked her, what are your memoirs about Sándor Görög? And she told me nice anecdotes. And the other way around, I went to Sándor, and he also remembered this woman. So I think these are really the last minutes when we have to collect these stories and memoirs, and we have to share them. So actually, both of them survived. As for Sándor Görög, he is very important for Kőszeg because he was kept there. His father sent him to Kőszeg, and the Verbita priests actually took care of him. Another detail which is important to mention here, that Kőszeg was a very unique place during the Second World War, the last year of the war. And I would like to refer to another cultural heritage milestone for us, Ágota Kristóf, who actually wrote her world famous novel, The Notebook, actually about her year in Kőszeg. She almost got to Kőszeg the same month when Sándor Görög, although the two people didn't know each other. Sándor was 10 years old, and Agota Kristóf was also 10 years old. It was a unique place because not only because it was close to the border, but because for many people it seemed like a relatively safe place. Among others, the prime minister, the leader of the Eurocross party, Szálasi, also believed that it was a relatively safe place. That's why he decided to move his headquarters to Kőszeg. So Kőszeg survived the very last months of the war under a very unique condition. On the one hand, it became the headquarters of the Eurocross party, the Eurocross ministries, and it also became a center of refugees. So thousands of people actually moved to the city. The third thing, as for the Jews, is that the local Jews were put into the ghetto and then sent to Auschwitz. The last, transport arrived in Auschwitz at the beginning of July 1944. But as for the rest of the Jews, Jewish workers had to work in the labor camps, and in Kőszeg there were actually 6 different labor camps. So 2,500 Jewish people actually worked there, and most of them died there in Kőszeg. Okay, so this is Sándor Görög at his very young age, and this is the house in Kőszeg which belonged to his family, and this is the building of the Verbita Prison, which actually saved the life of Sándor Görög. Okay, this is the deportations from Szombathely, Kőszeg, the first picture or first photo, and the second one is Szombathely. Okay, Kőszeg people, Kőszeg Jews and other from other neighboring towns, the Jewish people at the very beginning of July, late June, early July, were taken to Szombathely, and they were actually put on the transports and sent to Auschwitz from Szombathely. So that's why actually almost 4,000 Jews were taken from Szombathely to Auschwitz. As for memory politics, and I finish in 2 minutes, we still have mass graves or remainings of mass graves in Kőszeg. You can see on the second picture, the first picture is a memorial which is dedicated to the memory of the victims of the Holocaust. Actually, until 1951, a Jewish community still existed, a religious community, but then it was dissolved in Kőszeg as the politics of the communist regime, Rákosi. But the mass graves are still there. And the reason is that there were excavations in 1947, but not all the Jews, not all the remainings were taken to Budapest. So there are still hundreds of people who are in the forests nearby the city. And I think it's very important to refer to the famous historian Randolph Brown, who said that it was the age of silence from the 50s till the transition, in 1990, when actually it was almost impossible to talk about the Holocaust, or it was very much hidden. And lately, we, in the institution, and of course, in the larger discourse, we started to talk about it, and the memory became very much in the center, the Holocaust memory. It's quite important to mention that our colleagues, and this is the last picture I would like to show you, I try to refer to only a few research iASK, our institute, is responsible for. So there is a surface of the book, the history of the Szombathely Jews, the second volume. This is the first volume. The second volume will be the most tragic because it will explain the Holocaust and the post-war trials, etc., etc. As for Kőszeg, we know that there was only one trial, and this is very typical, the blaming of the victim. Only one trial when a doctor was questioned at the People's Court, a doctor who was also imprisoned in the labor camp, but he was, of course, Jewish, and he was responsible, or he had to select those Jewish prisoners who were unable to work anymore. And for months, he had to, on a daily basis, select the ones who were supposed to die, to be killed. And because of that, after the war, he was first sentenced, but then the sentence was cancelled finally. Okay, so just in a nutshell, we have a Jewish research group at iASK, and a very important thing is the beautiful synagogue. You can see it was in horrible shape even a few years ago, and Ferenc did a lot to initiate the reconstruction. So now we have cultural programs and concerts and other things, exhibitions in the synagogue. Also, it's important to mention that we work on ego documents, as you can hear. We had a colleague of us researched the Jewish cemetery, so we know quite a lot about who are buried there. And we also organized or supported exhibitions. A very important one took place 10 years ago in Szombathely. So in a nutshell, or as a conclusion, I would say that we try to work quite intensely on both cities and the region to make ego documents visible, and we try to read them and analyze them, and also we try to investigate more mass K or provide more mass K research. Thank you very much.